My name is Nicole. I've just turned 60. It's me, my husband George, and our son Kevin, a family of 3. Kevin is grown up and moved out, and he recently told us he's getting married. They're coming over soon to tell us all about it. I can't help but wonder what his partner is like. Maybe I'm just hoping they're a good person because of my own past experiences. This takes me back 30 years. Kevin was just about 5 months old at that time. We were living with my parents in their country home back then. We moved in with them because they were getting old and needed help, and I wanted to raise Kevin in the countryside. They had a large property with enough space for us, so George was on board with the move. George has 2 siblings, Paul and Laura, and their mother Donna, and let me tell you, they've caused me quite a headache. George included. Today I want to share a story about them from 30 years ago. George's family, except for his father Eric, were always so stingy and obsessed with money. They would ask for all sorts of things. Money, my belongings, to fix their eyebrows like mine, since was always kept George looking sharp, and even my household appliances. At first, I never lent them money, but I did give Laura things I didn't need, like a component stereo system or a handheld gaming console. Laura's habit of wanting my things didn't change even after we moved to the countryside. I remember lending her $1,000 once, making her sign a promise to pay it back, but I never saw that money again. Tamir. Since then, I've tried to say no to lending money as much as possible.
However, one day, Laura said, "My parents can't pay for the cram school, so I'd like to borrow it because I definitely have to pay it back someday."
Laura wants to go to cram school because she wants to improve her academic ability in the subjects she is weak in. George and Paul, feeling sorry for her, decided to split the cost. I was against it, but George insisted, so we agreed only if it was within his allowance. Laura doesn't plan to pay us back. She's always under a lot of pressure at home.
Sister Donna would say things like, "I've spent so much money on raising you. You'd better succeed." This even led to Laura running away from home once.
Actually, honestly, my in-laws' obsession with money has always troubled me. George has been financially independent since middle school, paying for his own phone, clothes, and more. He even covered phone bills for Paul and Laura. He's still paying off his student loans from college. And recently, Donna developed a mental illness, possibly bipolar disorder. It all stems from a debt issue at my in-laws' house. Neither my spouse nor I knew about it, but Donna had been borrowing money for living expenses. I never found out how much she borrowed, but it must have been a significant amount. In a family where she was a housewife, and they depended solely on Eric's income. Hidden from Eric, Donna secretly racked up debts because she couldn't bear to tell him they were short on the living expenses. Donna's mental health struggles led to some bizarre behaviors. She would suddenly scream for no apparent reason, or I'd find her hiding in the walk-in closet, mumbling to herself while clutching the money she needed to deposit. She even started speaking nonsensically at times. While I never saw these incidents firsthand, Paul regularly updated me through messages about Donna's condition. Regarding this issue, Paul had been bearing the brunt, not finding this situation amusing. He sent a bunch of complaining messages to my spouse and me. Messages like, "I'm struggling at home and here you are in an enviable situation." Or so, at least. To contribute some money were sent our way. At one point, there was talk of hospitalization, but after a few months, his condition seemed to stabilize, and he didn't need to be admitted. Last month, I saw Paul after a long time. He didn't seem mentally unwell at all. However, messages from Donna started arriving daily, a new development. Messages like, "I want to see my grandchild. I'll visit tomorrow. Send some vegetables." Since my parents are part-time farmers, the requests for vegetables are common. Previously, messages went to my spouse, but recently, knowing I make the final decisions, they've been directed at me. It seems easier for her to get a yes from Grace and me, so she continues to send them my way. Every time we meet, I give her vegetables. In return, Donna gives me towels or clothes. Honestly, they aren't to my taste and reek of cigarette smoke, which is unpleasant. But outwardly, it's become a sort of give-and-take relationship. In the midst of this, my mother fell ill. It wasn't life-threatening, just a recurrence of a previous ailment. Being diligent, she still works, taking her medication. However, I don't want her to overexert herself, so I've been handling the household chores. However, I don't want her to overexert, so I've been handling the household chores. Because of the busyness at home, I hinted that meeting the grandchild might be difficult for a while. That's when the frequency of messages increased. This endless repeats of messages like, "I bought a plushie for the grandkid. I want to hand it over. If we can't meet, I'll send it. Towels too. Is your mother well? Support her properly. Do the housework." Much love, the grandchild. It seems like a state of mental distress. I considered asking George to subtly tell her to stop messaging, but I'm afraid it might worsen her mental health. Paul is problematic in a different way. He hasn't caused a police incident yet, but has been involved in several assault cases. Listing the outrageous behaviors of my in-laws could go on endlessly. As for Eric, I'm not quite sure. He's a shadowy figure, always silent and holding a child whenever we meet. Since he never says anything, I never really understood his thoughts, even during Donna's illness. He's not a bad person, just silent, but it's hard to say. Honestly, I want to cut ties with such in-laws, leaving them be. It wouldn't surprise me if any of them caused a criminal disturbance. They're all that unreasonable. Sometimes I even feel George has a bit of their blood in him. I've been looking for a way to sever these ties without causing a stir. George seems to prioritize us over his family. He's had a tough time with his parents regarding money since childhood. If I said I wanted to cut ties, he'd probably be thrilled and agree wholeheartedly, but George often missteps in his actions. Worried it might make things worse, I've asked him not to get involved for now. I haven't thought about moving away secretly to escape my problems. Given my mother's illness and our financial situation, it seems unlikely we can do anything until George's scholarship loan is paid. Off, which feels like forever. Another major reason I want to distance myself from my in-laws is their involvement in a certain religion. My in-laws are followers of this religion, and Donna especially is very active in it. When I first met Donna, she took me to their place of worship, and I had to listen to a stranger talk about their beliefs for 2 hours, which was quite traumatic. Although George dislikes the religion, he was registered as a follower at birth without his consent. I hesitate to let Kevin meet them, fearing they might do the same to him without our permission. When Kevin met them, Donna and a friend excitedly talked about marrying him to her grandchild, who's of the opposite sex and the same age. They might have been joking, but it terrified me. Kevin is only a baby. This is no joke. It turns out Eric was a follower first, and Donna joined upon their marriage, becoming more engrossed than Eric. I was surprised to learn this since Eric seemed indifferent to religion. Eric might appear violent when angry, but I've never witnessed it. While Donna was ill, he managed to work and do household chores without complaint, which made me hope he was the only reasonable person in that family. However, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more to him than meets the eye. Then, one day, George received a message from Paul asking for money. It was a small amount, intended for his vocational school application fees. Paul, having given up his dream of becoming a professional fighter and deciding to become a firefighter instead, needed it for school. George refused, citing our lack of funds. If they're asking for money for application fees, it's easy to assume they'll need more for tuition. The tricky part is these financial requests always come from Paul or Laura. Assessing whether it's Laura's tutoring fees or Paul's application fees, such expenses should be covered by their parents. But they ask directly, bypassing their parents. It's unclear if their parents are behind this, but I suspect as much. I wish the in-laws would approach us directly so we could discuss it, but they seem to dodge the issue. George said he'd confront them if they ask again, but I remember him saying the same thing a while ago. We should have had a serious talk when $1,000 didn't come back. The real problem is, even if Paul and Laura earn money, Donna takes it away, leaving them penniless. They give most of their earnings, minus living expenses, to their family, and then turn to us for financial help. But despite their reckless spending on alcohol and cigarettes, my in-laws show no signs of stopping, and I don't see this pattern changing. Paul and Laura seem discontent with their situation, but they don't try to change it. Maybe they don't see how wrong it is. They don't understand when we point it out. Talking to them feels pointless. They just brush us off. Give me the money, they demanded, and that was that. It seems they're completely influenced by their parents. Trying to make them understand would take a lot of time. One day, George and I had a long discussion late into the night.
Paul said instead of paying for application fee, I want you to help pay for Laura's tuition, which we're splitting in half. We're splitting in half.
Paying Laura's tuition would cost about the same as the application fee. I had George firmly refuse to pay more than Laura's tuition. Then I had George called to find out what Eric really thought, something I had always wondered. Surprisingly, Eric had no idea that Donna, Paul, and Laura had been asking us for money all this time.
One told Eric was shocked, saying IWI Welly.
I hoped he would at least offer to repay us in words, but all he said was a mere sorry about that. I was so angry that I wanted to grab the phone and tell him everything, but I had decided not to get involved, so I barely held back. Eventually, we ended the call because Eric seemed too tipsy to have a serious conversation. We decided it would be better to send messages, so George and I drafted the text after several discussions.
George started saying things like, maybe you don't need to mention that, or you're really gonna send it, which infuriated me.
I asked, so you think this is okay?
He replied, no, it's not. He said, but what can we do? We can't increase Dad's income, and there's no need to stir things up, right?
I got really angry and said, I can't believe you're saying that. You're no different from your family. If you're so keen on siding with them, go back and live happily with your family. You might as well give them all your income. And ended up crying and yelling. It had been a long time since I last cried. George was clearly panicked. I felt like I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was fed up with being manipulated by my in-laws. For the time being, I asked George to leave the house until I calmed down. I just wanted him out of my sight for a while. After some time, I cooled down, called George back, and apologized. Meanwhile, George had sent the messages we drafted earlier, and we got replies from Donna and Paul.
What? You sent them?
Yeah, was that bad?
No, but we were still discussing the content.
I had a bad feeling and asked to see the phone. First, I read the message Donna had received from Eric, which said, "We were planning to pay you back. You said you didn't need it anymore," she wrote. This was about the $1,000 issue. We had decided not to include this, but George had sent it anyway.
Are we not going to mention this?
Oh, I thought it would make her point clearer.
Then you should have said that at the time. What was the point of our discussion?
I couldn't understand what George was thinking. I remember this feeling. It reminded me of the very people I couldn't understand the most. My in-laws. The same scent hit me and a wave of intense anxiety washed over me. I saw more messages from Paul that said, "Man, you got me in trouble with Dad. Sorry for the hassle."
Well, contact me for a while.
But the next day, there were more messages from Paul. Nasty stuff like, "Your wife is pretty nasty, huh? The worst."
What's this?
Well, actually,
Turns out while George was outside, he had sent messages saying, "You guys are gonna get me divorced." Fiery-tempered Paul must have stewed over it for a day before sending
these messages.
I was furious at George. We had agreed not to confront them directly. "Hey, what are you thinking? We agreed on what to say, remember? You're just ignoring all that. What's your game here? I really don't get it." I couldn't hold back my anger. I was shaking, trying to suppress my fury.
I'm sorry.
Not sorry. Basic answer me. You didn't just ignore our plan without thinking. You changed the message on purpose?
Why are you silent? If you have something to say it clearly.
Or by mentioning divorce, I'd inadvertently shifted their family's focus. Now they thought it was about saving our marriage, not just a general plea.
I can't hear you. If you have something to say it clearly.
Had I mentioned divorce, maybe it did sound like that. No, it's not like that.
I think I understand now what kind of mentality you have.
I'd known all along, really, just avoiding facing it. In the end, you just can't defy your parents fundamentally, like your siblings.
Complain about small things, maybe, but your mind's tainted with bad thoughts.
Be contaminated by being exploited. You said not to make a fuss, then sent those messages in a panic, blaming it on your wife. But you're like a dog, crawling back, lacking any agency. And now you're talking about divorce. Shall I give you one? It felt like I'd found a way to escape those lunatics. It was a simple matter. How can I cut ties with those people?
Then you can contribute as much as you want to those people. So it's not a bad idea, right?
So I can't think about divorce.
If you don't want a divorce, then here's my condition. You need to go to counseling. I can't keep living with someone who's not in their right mind.
Counseling? What are you talking about?
You know what I mean. You're not even aware of it, are you? But you're acting crazy. You're like one of those monsters in comics that pretends to be human. You know, where their core values are so different, you realize you can never understand them. You must have always been like this, but this situation made it clear to me. Things can't go back to how they were.
I looked firmly at George. George was flustered. Still, I couldn't figure out what he was thinking.
Maybe that was a bit much. Let me put it simply. You have two choices. One is to divorce me. The other is to get counseling and become a normal person. That's it. Which will it be?
I don't want a divorce.
Then you should visit a psychiatrist today.
Since then, George has changed as if he was reborn. There were things about him that drew me to him when we got married. Maybe Donna and others made it hard to see them. But thanks to counseling, or perhaps just seeing him as a person, his charm became clearer to me. After 30 years together, I can say choosing him wasn't a mistake. I'm glad I fought with George and his family back then. Kevin might face problems in his marriage too, but I believe he'll overcome them. After all, he's our child.